Well, good afternoon. Today is the 10th verse we're going to look at this year. I'm glad that you've been hanging with us this year and looking at these verses as we go through all of 2020. We're having these 52 verses that is crucial to every Christian that they should know and that should understand. And it comes from the book, of course, of O.S. Hawkins, the Joshua Code. And today we're dealing with Ephesians 5, verse 22 and verse 23. And the title of this lesson today is basically called The Fruit of the Spirit. And the verse is this: the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, self-control. Of such is no law. And as we look at this, it's the idea of growing fruit. You know, I had peach trees one time, and there was these moments where something would happen, maybe the lawnmower would get too close or whatever, and one of them would break off, and that branch would end up dying. And sometimes the worms would come in and infest it, and it wouldn't grow much. And so it helps us to understand the verse in John 15, 4 and 5, where it says, abide in me and I in you, as a branch cannot bear fruit in and of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. And says, Jesus said, I'm the vine, you're the branches. He who abides in me will bear much fruit, but apart from me, you can do nothing. And so it isn't the fruits of the Spirit, it is the fruit of the Spirit. It's the product of the Spirit living within us. It's an all-encompassing fruit that several things are character traits of that fruit that come out of us as we have the Spirit living within us. Now, O.S. Hawkins puts it like this. He breaks it up into three different sections, as if there's three in each section. And so he says love, joy, and peace fall into the section of a changed life, or the fruit of the Spirit will have in us a countenance that is obvious. Now, we know what countenance is. We know that that's what a person kind of exudes when they come into the room. If you love someone, if they walk in, if they're not feeling well, if they're down, discouraged, you can kind of look at them and you see their countenance is not what it should be. And you say, hey, your countenance is not what it should be. Proverbs 27:17 says that as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens the countenance of another. And so we know what countenance is, and there's some things in our countenance that should be obvious. And one of them, and the highest one, is love. And this is the highest action. We know we've been told in Scripture to love our neighbor as ourselves, that they will know you're my disciples by your love for one another. And when 1 Corinthians 13 it says, look, these three remain: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. And so we know that the word in this verse is the word used in the Greek as agape, which indicates the highest level of love, and is the same word used where we see John 3:16, for God so loved, for God agape the world. And so love is one of the things that should be obvious in our life, a part of our countenance. And then joy. Joy comes from the love living in us. This is tied to it. It should be visible on a person's face and through their actions. John 15:11 says that the night before Christ died, and he talked to his disciples, he said this: I have spoken to you that my joy might remain in you and that your joy may be full. Now, the idea is his joy is in us so that our joy can be full. It didn't mean we're always going to be happy. It didn't mean they were going to be happy when he died. They were going to struggle. But it did mean that joy was going to rise up out of them when they came back to their senses through it all. And that joy ends up resulting in this other thing of peace. Again, Jesus says, look, this is something that lives in us, and it's an obvious thing that comes out of us. And he says, my peace I give you, not as the world gives you, but I give it to you. And so don't let your hearts be troubled. Let that peace. Listen, I don't want to pretend like we're never going to be down. We're never always going to be loving. We're always going to be peaceful. But here's the thing, that as a whole in our life, if people follow us around, this should be what defines obvious things of our countenance. The opposite of those things should be when we're out of character. And so that's one of them, that they're obvious parts of our life: our countenance, love, joy, peace. And then our conduct. He says our conduct is order, and he uses long suffering and kindness and goodness as those three things. Long suffering means that we're willing to basically suffer long. I get the picture as best seen as a huge dog, maybe a huge German shepherd with all this power and strength, and allowing a little kitten to continually jump on him and scratch at him and claw him, and just allowing him to do it. It's another word for long suffering is, or another phrase is, far from anger, or we cannot be worked up too much. Now, I know some people who can be worked up really quickly, and I know some who can take a long time to work them up. Now, I'm not saying that they're passive in every area of life and they have no opinion. That's not what I'm talking about. No, but it's that we're just long suffering. Another word for it is patience, which patience is kind of a word in our little modern society that, man, everything's fast paced, honk your horn, man, get out of my way type thing. Patience is something that's not a big seller in life, and but here is this idea that we are to have this of our character, an orderly character of patience, and then kindness comes along with that. The same word used in Ephesians when it showed that Christ was patient toward us, his kindness toward us. He showed us kindness in Ephesians 2:7. So we're to pass that kindness on, and it goes without saying that Jesus did good things. He had goodness. He went about doing good works, as Acts 10:38 says. And so we're to have orderly, these things are to be orderly in our life, conduct that we have of goodness and kindness and long suffering. And then we are to have a character that is obedient. Now, of course, I think all of these things should be obvious in our life as well, but we have a character that's obedient. A faithfulness exudes from our character. It would be a great testimony to say, well, you're a faithful person. That means you're a good steward of your word. You're a good steward of your time. You're a good steward of your life that you've been given. You're faithful in it. And not necessarily just in attendance to something, for anything could be faithful. A dog could attend something on a regular basis. But it's talking about being faithful with what we've been given, using what God has blessed us with for his glory, being a good steward of it. Another obvious or obedient part of our life, our character, should be meekness. Not weak. Not weak. We're not to be weak. God said he didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. So it's not necessarily that we're weak, but more like we're like a stallion would be, that's under control. And it had been broken by somebody. Now, it doesn't mean we walk around broken and beat down. It just means that we have full power, but yet fully in control, because of the master living in our life. And that leads to the last one of self-control. This is an outward flow of what's happening within. All these things are going on. Our conduct is what it should be. Our character is what it should be. Our countenance is what it should be. And we have love, joy, peace. We have long suffering. We have kindness. We have goodness that exudes out of our life. We have faithfulness, meekness, self-control. So as I look at this verse, and I learned it a little bit out of order, so it's really hard for me to kind of put these back in order. But as I look at this, I have to ask this question: how is my countenance? Do I have obvious countenance traits of love, joy, and peace? And what's my conduct like? Does patience, kindness, and goodness kind of characterize the way I respond to life situation and to others? And then what about my character? Am I faithful? Am I gentle? Do I have self-control in my life? That's what we're to think about as we look at this scripture for today, Ephesians 5:22 through 23. It says this: the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, kindness, self-control. Against such is no law. And I got them out of order again, but